Michael, unmute yourself, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hi, my name is Michael Dinwiddie, and I want to welcome you to the Black Theater Network. This conversation we're going to have this evening with Dominique Morriseau and Michael Eric Dyson. It's always a thrill to talk to really amazing, incredible people. We've already started our conversation. I wish I could have recorded what we said at the beginning, but we'll bring in as much of it as we can. Now, there's a couple things I want to tell you before we start. This conference was originally going to be in Detroit. So you're going to hear a lot of talk about Detroit. Woody King, we honored. Michael Eric Dyson's from Detroit. Dominique's from Detroit, and so am I. So with that said, that frame, I'd like to first introduce Dominique Morriseau. Dominique is a playwright, a MacArthur Fellow, and her plays, The Detroit Project, 3 plays, all of which I'm lucky to have seen. Skeleton Crew, Paradise Blue, Detroit 67. Amazing, wonderful, beautiful work that really celebrates the city. I love the fact that she said that she was doing what August Wilson was doing for Pittsburgh, she was doing for Detroit. Dominique has won many, many awards. She's won Adelco Awards. She's won National Festival Awards, Kennedy Center Awards, et cetera, et cetera. I can go on and on. She's worked for HBO. She was a producer on Shameless. And she is one of the signers of the letter, the BIPOC demands for white American theater. I'd like to welcome Dominique Morriseau. Hey, how you doing? How's California?
You know, California is cool right now. It's actually a nice day. It's not too hot. We don't have a lot of humidity. I'm actually chilling. I'm chilling in California.
Good, I'm glad. Well, I know you're a mountain girl, so I'm glad you came down from the mountains just to be with us today.
I'm in the valley. Now I'm a valley girl. I didn't know this was gonna be my life, but this is where I'm at.
Okay. Well, our third amazing guest is Michael Eric Dyson. Michael is an academic, author, preacher, and a former radio host. I can just go on and on. He's written more than 22 books. He's written texts that really define and help us understand our culture, our ways of being in the world. He's someone at 19 years old, he was ordained a Baptist minister. He was called early in life, and he's still being called as a cultural critic and as a professor. So I want to welcome Michael Eric Dyson.
Hey, what up, though?
Hey, how you doing?
How you feeling?
Short enough? Were they short
enough?
What up, though? Okay, good.
What up, though?
So the first thing to get us going is we're all from Detroit. We all had different lives in Detroit, different worlds in Detroit, but we're all now talking about the theater tonight. So I just wonder, can you tell me about some of your first Detroit theater experiences?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, ladies first.
I'll say that one of my first, I am old and young enough to have seen Stephanie Mills in The Wiz. She came to Detroit when I was a kid, and I don't know what theater I was at. I cannot tell you anything. I felt close to the stage. I don't know where that was. And where was it?
It was the Fisher Theater.
But it felt like it was like in a black box. I'm like, my memory is like I was up close on her face.
You were a child. It was the Fisher.
That's crazy. And so anyway, so I saw her in that and was blown away. And then I also saw Philip Michael Thomas in No Place to Be Somebody by Charles.
At the Best Pocket Theater.
Okay, like you, get out. I don't know what I was doing. I was just following where my mama took me. But those things, they impacted me. I saw myself on those stages, or I saw my culture represented on those stages, the culture that I was growing up underneath and are all around me. And that did it for me.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Let me see. Let me see what the wine cellars buy.
Yes.
Yo, man. And I was like, yo, this is theater, huh? Because you think about it, we coming out of a tradition with Dudley Randall, yes, Maury Evans, all those great poets, with that Detroit sound, the rhetorical, mastery. Yeah. And then I'm coming, also out of the great theatrical productions in churches.
Yeah.
So I'm a member of Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church in Detroit with the great Reverend Dr. Frederick Sampson. And then I would listen to him in the morning. And then Charles Gilchrist Adams at Hartford. in the afternoon and C.L. Franklin at night.
Right
So
on.
you know, between theater, Detroit born and bred theater, local productions, church productions, and that kind of oratorical wizardry, I was just bathed in the magic of the word, man.
Yeah.
And then we had Motown too.
Oh,
We had that theatricality. We had that whole performance of Blackness and a new way of shaping who we were and a way of thinking of who we were. You bring that up because both of you have dealt with Motown. Michael, you in your books, Dominique, you with your theater, with your play. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what you learned about the Motown experience through your work.
For me, it's different because I'm a child of the generation of, that grew up in Motown. So I'm like I have a sideways, but also raised in it kind of point of view, but it's like I'm a second generation Motown baby. I call it like that, And so in my household, my parents, of course they didn't play anything but Temptations music because they loved it so much. But also, our Christmas is all Motown, everything. It's the Motown Christmas album plays to this day is like, that is our tradition, But I think that growing up without it being my like the center of my gravity, because it, the music I grew up on was like, 90s hip hop, and R&B, when R&B was really a thing, or whatever it is, and so having grown up with it sort of like a second generation baby, when I went back and revisited it in my work, I remember having this moment, kind of like, duh, was going to happen to somebody that looks at the moment I'm in and go, we're going to be like, duh. But they're like discovering it for the first time was this moment of going, wait a minute. I was writing Detroit 67 and I was like, so wait a minute. This Motown song was out at the same time. Like you could tell me that like, in 1967, Dr. King was still alive, or Malcolm X had been dead for 2 years, or, this movement was happening over here in the Black Power generation and SNCC was happening or whatever, right? You could tell me that Vietnam was happening, or you could tell me that this Motown song was out. But I never, because I didn't live through it the first time, I'd never thought about those things happening in concert, And so I started thinking like, I did like backwards math for myself when I was writing. Oh my God, like what must that have felt like for that to all have been happening at the same time? My God, the 60s were amazing. That's sort of like how I experienced it, and I'm thinking about the time that we're in now. I'm like, this is going to be, somebody's going to have this experience about what's happening now, in our lives. And we are here again, in many ways. And so just looking at the way that a love song was more political than I ever thought it was. At my first experience of it, until I went back and started studying it from a historical perspective.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit older, so
Just a little bit.
So I was born in 58. So Motown is founded in 59. I'm growing up listening to Aretha on the radio. My mama used to go to hear C.L. Franklin preach. Oh. You don't have me, oh Lord. So you got C.L. preaching, right? Clarence LaVaughn Franklin preaching.
Yeah.
And the great 14-year-old Aretha, I will never grow old. And I'm growing up 58, 60, 61, 62, 63. I started catching on to Motown. My entree, of course, I listened to the Temptations, the Supremes. I mean, those were the staples, right? And then, of course, the Four Tops. But when I discovered that this little old Afro kid that had the same Afro as me was 10 years old, was, singing. And I'm like, that dude is my age, right? That was my entree. I do now. I want you back. Ooh, ooh, baby. I mean, wow. I mean, that was just mind blowing, right? That Michael Jackson, a student of William Harris, and that Philly sound, right? Because he's born in Indianapolis, Indiana, listening to some of that Philly music. And then la, 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 la means I love you. what kind of prodigy do you have to be to understand that Jackie Wilson is great and you're 6 and 7 years old, and that William Harris is the lead, the lead singer of a group that a lot of people didn't even know. They knew his voice, but they didn't know his name. Who knows the Shy-Lights' names, right? Yeah. And so that kind of prodigious song, I used to have my little tape recorder, right? The little reel-to-reel, and I would be listening to the radio, recording Michael Jackson, looking through the windows, right? Or talking about ABC, and then I mean, come on. I mean, and then stop, the love you save may be your own. Darling, take it slow, or someday you'll be all alone.
I love how it happens. I mean, love how it happens.
I mean, my man, I'm 10 years old, checking this out, listening to this music, right? In love with Gladys Knight when she and the Pips are early at Motown.
Yes.
My aunt says, you in love with her, ain't you? I was like, yeah. And so when you think about the world, the womb, Smokey Robinson, Black entrepreneur spirit. So when I write my book on Marvin Gaye, and I'm writing a book on one of the great geniuses, arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest pop albums ever produced with what's going on.
Yes.
And so I learn all this stuff, imbibe all this stuff. And as Ms. Morriseau has said, here I am, 9 years old. I was 8 years old when the riots popped off in '87. I'm asking my mama, what is that trail of smoke up in the sky? And she tells me it's because of a blind pig. And I said, why does an unseeing mammal, what does that have to do with dadgum a riot going on, right? What slides through, there's a riot going on. So I didn't know what was happening. I saw people coming down the street with afros like mine, with hair up in their hair, and then they got TV sets, and I'm like, damn, this is astonishing. And then the next year, Martin Luther King Jr. dies. Yeah. The Detroit Tigers win the pennant. Bob Gibson. Now here I am, I'm 9 years old. I don't want to vote for the other team, but they got the black ball players. We ain't got but three. We had what? We had Gates Brown, Earl Wilson, and the great Willie Horton. Number 23, before Jordan. Number 23, 16 years old, Northwestern High School, hit a home run in Tiger Stadium. So
you're talking
all that. That's all that.
All that. And
all that came in.
After that, I have to tell you the thing you reminded me of, and you guys will both know about this. First of all, if anybody doesn't know what a blind pig is, see Detroit '67, okay? Because that'll help you understand. I'm not going to explain it right now.
Such a great play.
It took me a long time.
Such a great play.
It really is. Dominique.
Such a great play. The archaeology, the geography, the intense intelligence, the panoramic rhetorical view that through language itself, you began to peep what was happening on multiple layers. Yes. I mean, and I got to say this, I don't want to, but look, when I went to see, I'm sitting up in the Imperial Theater and I'm looking at the narrative drive of using songs as the web to tell a story. And I kept saying, this is ingenious, man. Like, I didn't even know Dominique Morriseau had written that when I went in, right? I was just like, let me go get these tickets, go see and then it blew. I said, no wonder that kind of rhetorical genius to be able to do that, to tell them kind of stories and to tell a story of Dennis, who himself was being told a story about the song he's singing, and we see the meta narrative going on with her rhetorical precocity. I'm just saying, she's the fan. Y'all need to check.
You to write the reviews.
I was going to say, well, what's fascinating to me about this? First of all, Motown itself had a theatrical background with Maxine Powell, the lady who trained the act. She had trained as an actress in Chicago in the 1930s and 40s.
Charm school.
School. She was somebody who put the first black model on the back of the Detroit Free Press. In fact, it was Gwen Gordy, Barry's sister, who was a model. And this is how trained those actors to be who they were. And so it all came out of a theatrical sense and a sensibility of how we're going to perform who we are. And then the other thing is, again, we have Ain't Too Proud, but we also had Motown the Musical written by Berry Gordy Jr. himself, testifying to what his story was. So we really have a rich history and moment in terms of where we are, in terms of thinking. And Michael, I went on your Twitter, I'm gonna read you what you wrote, okay? July 12th. Saw Hamilton in theater, now again on TV. It is a transcendent work of art that translates the struggle for democracy in the vernacular of the descendants of the enslaved. Tell a story about America that makes us reimagine our history. Lin-Manuel is a genius, as is the cast. And I just bring that up to say, we see this evolution in American theater that's really quite remarkable in terms of Dominique's voice is out there. It's out there in straight plays, but it's also out there in musicals. We see Hamilton, which is a reimagining of how we should think about our history. We see all kinds of ways that we're reshaping it. And we also see the theater of the streets right now. Actual theater of Donald Trump trying to stage a theatrical revolution or whatever you want to call it. But then you see people resisting that and understanding that we have to perform our freedom. And so one of the things I want to talk about in terms of the way you guys are thinking about your work is how do you perform your freedom in your work? And I'm going to go specifically to your writings, Michael, on Prison Pipeline, and Dominique, your play Pipeline. So I'd like you to talk about the ways in which you think in this moment we can start to rethink the way we think about incarceration of people of color.
Well, I done been talking. I'm gonna let Dominique go. I done been talking.
No. Listen, we can listen to you talk all day, brother. That's an interesting statement that you just made, Michael Dinwiddie, because I've been talking to a lot of people, younger people that I mentor, and also my peers, and how we're defining like performance, the like performative activism versus like, I guess, I don't know what else, activism, and I look at performance as a part of activism. Like I look at you have to, demonstrations are called demonstrations that like there is a performance to that, and so and that coupled with policy and pushing for legislation and all these things combined, that's what moves the needle socially, right? So you need performance as a part of the action. And then, there's performative action, but there's also displays of action inside on the stage and off the stage to match actual real policy change. I say that to say, when I look at Pipeline, because I'm a playwright first, when I think of, or a storyteller first, I should say. But when I look at stories, I go, how do I take something really broad, like the School to Prison Pipeline and the scholarship that I have read around it, right? Including Eric Dyson's scholarship around it, and Michelle Alexander's book, like how do I take the scholarship that I've read around it and then how do I personalize it in narrative form, to get somebody who can't understand that broad concept to now understand it on a very personal and narrative level, so it goes from really, really broad to like, hey, I want to write about the School to Prison Pipeline, to like, who is that? Who's going to invoke that to me? I have to start thinking about like character, like who invokes that? Whose body do I want to put that political story on? Because politics always impact the people. And as I'm trying to like, when I share work with anyone, I try to remind people like who want to call me a political writer, which I take that mantra now, but I didn't always, I was like, I'm just telling stories about people. I was like, oh, well, that's kind of the same thing, because these are the people that your policies are going to impact. When I write about Detroit and Skeleton Crew, when I write about the factories closing, I'm calling to mind the people that, when you say things like let Detroit go bankrupt, I'm going to show you who you're talking about. Right. I'm going to show you the people you're talking about. That's what narratives do. They're going to show you the people that you can be. If Betsy DeVos wants to go inside and make a bunch of, sign a bunch of bills and make a bunch of blanket policies, around the people that my people are going to be impacted by that. She'll have to look at them in the face. She'll never have to see them or go see the impact that her policy is having on them. I'm going to show you the impact your policy is having on them. I'm going to remind you the people behind the bills and the conversations and the laws and the legislation, And so for me, Pipeline, I went from, that's a big idea to, I started thinking about Michael Brown's mother. And I was like, damn, Leslie McSpadden said, she kept saying when he was killed, I just got him to graduate. you know? And I kept thinking, like, did that what relationship was that between her and her son that says, I just got him to graduate? That was a feat, you know, that they put some in, that what they invested something in that for him to get snatched from us. And I started thinking about the relationships of Black mothers and their sons, you know, and Black fathers and their sons, even when the Black mothers and the fathers don't have a relationship with each other. Right. And so that's what led me to wanting to make Pipeline about a mother and a son, you know, specifically, because I kept thinking of the mamas that were losing their sons, you know, and how those mothers got very pushed. I mean, so many of them have been pushed into the front lines of activism in our country. They are running for, you know, offices and, you know, government offices and the like. And so I thought about that. And I started also I think about the kids and the young people that I have taught, that I engage with, that I have engaged with in Detroit and in New York, you know, and how much we don't, when you say things like teachers are failing the kids in the public schools, and I go, well, then who's failing the teachers? I'm gonna show you the teachers. I'm gonna show you the teachers that I grew up. My mama was a teacher in Highland Park for 40 years. You know, when I graduated Michigan, I went and taught with her at her school, Henry Ford Academy in Highland Park, for a year before I moved to New York, right? And so I have seen, and then I taught all inside of New York public schools. I have seen what these teachers are going through and the stress and the traumatic stress that they are experiencing and that their students are experiencing through how through a lot of the ways in which the school system works, that they are bumping up against and trying to serve their students. And so I think you got to be able to see the trickle down of how all of these policies impact the people that are sort of embodying the most stressful and under duress parts of those policies, you know? And so that's sort of, for me, the approach to the school to prison pipeline, and Pipeline particularly. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, I just want to hear some more of that. Yeah, you know, my brother was in prison for 30 years until he died. He died there. And it's still painful to me. You know, I've had to preach both of my brother's funerals in the last 3 years, 2 of them. And, you know, to talk about how, as Dominique said, the performativity of the word, the inherent dramatic structure that so much of our lives conform to, and it is half artifice. So as an artist, you try to figure out how to tap into the natural rhythms and dramatic structures of lived events. And then you subject it to the pressure, as she does, of her ingenious dramatic impulse. The performance grows out of understanding, you know, what strands and what strides can be derived from that inherent dramatic structure, and then how you can conform that to your own artistic, you know, vision to tell a story, and to tell a story by tapping into denied realities that have been rendered invisible. Because like she said, the stuff that Trump ain't saying, that Betty DeVos ain't saying, that Ben Carson ain't saying. Who are those people? My brother was one of those people that she has so brilliantly portrayed in her work. And so, you know, I always, when I went up in those prisons where he was, as I tracked him through the geography of carceral imprisonment and the geography of limitation, and then I think about the shackles that our slave foremothers and forefathers had to endure. Yes. And the way in which Michel Foucault talks about the carceral state, and then how the microphysics of power and how they're exercised on Black bodies, and how those Black bodies are the booty and loot of white theft from the very beginning, abduction and looting, not a mad at what's going on in the streets. You are the original looters.
Yeah.
You are the original thieves. you dressed up under false pretenses as Native people to rip off the tea up in Boston.
That's right.
And so when I think about carceral situations and circumstances of Black people in imprisonment, and as Dominique is so brilliantly written about the pipeline, because we in school, they kick us out at 5 and 6 and 7 years old. Then we get put in detention sent to, warehoused up into detention center, which becomes a feeder into jail, which becomes another feeder into prison.
Yep.
And so it's a systemic issue and a systematic attempt to control the Black body, the brown body, and the other body. So, my work has tried to tap into that, to talk about that, and to talk about a wide range of people, whether I'm talking about Nas and Illmatic or Jay-Z in my latest book, or Tupac in the other book, or Marvin Gaye, or Barack Obama, or Bill Cosby with his complicated and messy situation, and the like. I've been trying to come at, these serious situations, and then more broadly in my book, Why I Love Black Women, and why it is that Black women have borne the brunt of so much of the horror and the pain, as Dominique talks about Mike's mother, and, the pride they took in getting this boy to graduate. And he had told his aunt, but he said, don't tell my mama, I want to tell her myself. And so that diploma on the wall was recognizing the hard work and what it took, because the system was against kids like that. It ain't that he's dumb. Right. It's just that they are heartless and refusing to acknowledge the humanity of Black people.
He's fighting for his humanity and to be seen and to exist in a space that is saying there's no space for you. And what I get from what you're talking about and the ways in which we're talking about this, our theme this year is radical longevity. Mm-hmm. And so I think about the notion of education. I think about the Black church in terms of radical longevity. And I think of the traditions of theater that have come out of our culture, that have come out of our first moments coming across on whichever one, Amistad, or whichever one you want to choose. The idea that we brought with us a notion of our humanity that has never left us, and never let be taken from us. And we have found spaces where we do and create that. And so I think back to Detroit Concept East Theater, which was being founded, and where Amir Baraka's plays were being done in the early days. I think back to the era Bonstell Theater, where they were doing Ruth and Mr. Charlie, and doing Amen Corner, and doing plays like that. I think back even to the Fisher, I don't say even, the Nederlanders were bringing in African-American Pearly, the River Niger, the trial of Abraham Lincoln. So we have a really rich, incredible surrounding that we came out of in terms of culture, in terms of thinking about theater. But the thing that I'm getting tonight, and the way we're talking about it, there's an important aspect of the creative that is really critical. When Dominique talks about the politics that she's writing, we talk about the politics, economics, the ways in which we talk about sociology and notions of aesthetics and art, we're really, really talking about a critical notion of the world that we got a lot of that from the Black arts movement. I mean, that was in some ways, we get Harlem Renaissance too, but Black arts movement, the Chicago movement, different places and spaces where we've come to this place where we have multitudinous voices really helping us shape the way that we think about the world. So I have a question, believe it or not. And what do you want to say to those who are listening about how we shape our culture today?
Yeah, I can't wait to hear. I was like, I just want to hear what Michael Eric Dyson has to say about that. But I want to lob it because I have a question inside that question.
Okay, good, please.
About what we want to see. Can you say it again? I just want to say it out loud, the question you asked.
What do you want to say to those who are listening about the uncertainty in the culture today? What do we want to come out of it? What do we want to come out of
the uncertainty of where we are today? Yeah, I mean, I was already reaching a point inside of myself, and what I am discovering has been amplified by hundreds of other theater makers, where I have been there's a way in which I came to this art to be liberated, you know, and to it saved my life. You know, my father, he just passed in Detroit in February. And thank you. And literally right before COVID hit, you know, and struck my entire family, you know, and I'm still dealing with the after effects of, and my mom and I, and, you know, my family is losing their hair. You know, like we don't know if this thing has spread to the organs of the body. Like we don't know what this illness is doing. And I think, damn, my daddy just checked out before he was like, I'm out, you know, before this all crazy stuff started unfurling in our city, you know. But my father,
how was your father?
My daddy was 72 years old. And but what's interesting, you know, and my father was very revolutionary minded.
Yes.
And he trained me that way. I mean, I tell jokes. I did my father's eulogy, greatest honor of my life. And in his eulogy, I talk about when I was, you know, in the 6th grade, and my father, me and my girlfriends, we wanted to go to Fairlane Mall, which for those of you who are watching who don't know, Fairlane Mall is in Dearborn. But for my father, it was also, Dearborn was that city that growing up, my family said, they'll call you N-word to your face, right? Yeah. And Fairlane Mall was a mall that was like our fanciest mall, you know, but it was also a mall where they put a curfew. They're policing black and brown teenagers that would come there, right? So my daddy did not want me to spend his hard-earned money at Fairlane Mall. He refused to shop there. And so, but I was in the 6th grade, and that's where we wanted to you know, that's where the Q boys were gonna be. And there's not a lot of places for us to hang out at 12. You know, the mall is pretty much it. So I really fought this with my father. So what my father does in order to kind of, I guess, what I'm now realizing, at the time I did not know why he was doing this, he was just a terrible person. And now I realize was an act of protest and education. My father blasts Malcolm X, The Ballad or the Bullet, the entire way that he takes me to me and my friend. He blasts that he would not let me listen to Boys to Men on WJLB. Like he forced us to listen to Malcolm X, The Ballad or the Bullet. And I just thought he was just trying to torture me. So, you know, but I say that to say it's on my father's shoulders that I stand in this moment, that I recognize what he was instilling in me, the self-pride and determination that my father was instilling in me. I have reached a point in my career where I can no longer function. I can no longer do this, where my people are going to be the backseat, have a backseat, you know, to this ride. And they cannot be, you know, I call it Jim Crow theater. When my people are not in the audience, when I'm on the stage and I'm not in the house, that feels very Jim Crow to me. And I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to participate in Jim Crow theater. I can't do it. You know, if we're not going to make a concerted effort, because there's a lot of lip service that's been given around theater, a lot about this. I've talked to so many, I'm on a board of theaters. I love the American theater. And yet I am reaching a point where I cannot keep, my body cannot be fragile out on these streets. And then I come into these theater houses and my body is still fragile. I have to be liberated. I found this art to be liberated. So I cannot continue to do it if I am going to continue to be abused by it. Right. So I'm reaching that place. And so what I want to see coming out of this, you know, I stand on the revolution that my father spoke about and dreamed about. And I feel like I'm taking that baton. I feel very purposed in it. I feel so purposed in it, in his death, to say, I got you, daddy. You know, it's clicking, you know, and I want to come into this new moment in a place where we are no longer going to just accept lip service for our liberation, that we have to see it in practice. And I want to see institutional practices and shifts. And I don't think that's not been a secret. Like I've said this like many moons ago. I say it through my work. I say it all the time, you know, but I think what's surprising me in the moment is how many of my very visible co-artists and peers, how many of them feel the same way. And there's a burnout happening, or there's a lack of, somehow the joy of the art has been, you know, renegotiated into all of these other things. And that somehow it feels like it wasn't gonna move. And I feel like, well, now we got a plague and a pandemic, and we got a plague and an insurrection. if not now, I don't know when else things are going to change, how we're going to use this moment to change, And so I'm hoping to see major infrastructural shifts. I'm hoping to see us call out white supremacy inside of the institutions that we are working within. I love the theaters that I'm on the boards of or whatever, and yet but I am a part of that system, and I want to see it. I want to actively dismantle it with hopefully the other theater makers and administrators of that institution, because the lip service is not going to be enough. So I guess I'm just saying, inside of that, the moment that we're talking about, when I think of our total humanity, when I think of the personalization of this of the school to prison pipeline, and why that issue is so personal to Brother Michael Eric Dyson, because of his family, because he's seen it up close and personal. He has felt the brunt of what happens when incarceration is the solution. And now we have law and order. This law and order mandate that keeps coming down, and that's impacting. I'm like, people are getting taken off the streets of Detroit, off the streets of Portland, off the streets of Chicago, and unmarked. Like, we don't know what cars these are. This is like, I start thinking of the bodies in Mississippi that went missing, throughout the civil rights movement, throughout lynching eras, where we just go missing in the night, and that's it. And we don't get to have a check and balance on that. We don't get to call that out. We don't even know your badge number. Like, what's happening? Like, we are in a state of terror. And so I want to see theater makers not just give lip service to that, or put these ideas on their stages and not implement it inside of their institutions. I want to be safe. I want to be safe when I come out of this pandemic. I want to be safe to make theater, to perform theater, to participate in the audience of theater. I want to be safe and protected and well. And I believe in our wellness. Like, we are in the business of wellness, whether we know it or not. But theater artists, we're in the business of wellness making. Like, we are bringing people together inside of spaces who would never normally sit next to each other in a whatever, and we're asking them to go on a ride, on an emotional journey together, or a cerebral journey together, or in my favorite ones, both, and have an experience that is going to hopefully move a conversation forward. We can't do that if my body is not safe in those spaces. Then how are we going to do that? And so I guess I'm curious to hear how this moment, what this is like for the one that was born in 58, not 78, like what this moment,
54,
what this looks like to you guys, and what is possible, because I'm talking to young people who are disillusioned, because that shit starts, that has happened before in every other movement that I've studied, it happens internally, where we start turning on each other. You elitist, and you can't lead this movement, and you such and such, and you can't lead this movement, and it sounds to me, it feels to me historically a repetition, of what happens inside our movement. So how do I tell any of my mentees that I'm searching for words for them to keep them active and in the game and fighting the good fight? When dissolution happens inside, and you also, institutions are kind of freaking out they're freaking out about being called out about anything right now. Yeah. It's like, what, in a pandemic, how can you call me how am I practicing white supremacy? Because we all are, so how, how do I tell my mentees, what we're standing in the history of, to let them see why to get in this fight right now, and why to change something that we're going to come out of this moment with change nationally and inside of our individual industries. That would be what I want to hear and know, and ask you guys to help me shape that for the ones that are listening.
I want to say something too. First of all, thank you. That was amazing. Mm-hmm. You made me think about when I was in my college days. I went to see The Black Terror by Richard Wesley, which was on stage at the Bonstell Theater, in which we got to see this kind of enactment of what that was. But the thing that really came to my mind was John Lewis, this passing giant who was not always thought of in the way he's being talked about now. Remember at March on Washington, they didn't want him to speak. He was considered too radical, but then he's connecting with A. Philip Randolph, who's connecting a whole different movement, a whole different notion of, I'm not gonna go to war for you. I'm not gonna do these things. I'm not gonna participate in that way. I think about Free Southern Theater, and I think about all these things coming together in a moment. Exactly what you're saying, Dominique, that we've kind of understood that now the bill of goods is not what we want our outcome to be. The success that is the momentary is not the success that will help our people, that will help heal the hurt and the trauma, because America is in trauma. You know, I mean, it really is, you know, on every level, you know, and in some ways, the most traumatic are those who are now, I mean, I think of Lynn Nottage and Ruined. I think of the playwrights Katori Hall and the work she's doing. I think of Richard and Charles Fuller, you know, people who've been testifying and really moving us forward in this conversation and moving us to this moment now. So I just remember C.T. Vivian. I remember these guys who are nonviolent warriors. So what you see, it has to be on every level. It has to be artistic, aesthetic. It has to be political as well. And as you know, you're calling out Betsy DeVos, who, you know, that's Amway. You know what I'm saying? Like, her brother is Eric Prince, from the people who murdered people in Iraq and never got tried for it. You know what I'm saying? Doing contracts with the US government. So there's a level and layer of power that is so destructive and so filled with itself that it does not acknowledge that it should not exist as it does exist.
Mm-hmm. No, that's powerful. Well, you know, I'm just gratified, you know, that we have such great art that is a reflection of, an inspiration for, and a benchmark and a bellwether and a goad to push us forward. You know, if you mention Lynn Nottage, if you mention Susie Laurie Parks, if you mention Katori Hall with Mountaintop, where you reimagine Martin Luther King Jr. And you reinvest in him a denied humanity because he was such an iconic figure that his flesh and blood seemed at war with the iconographic status he occupied. And yet, if we are to truly understand his greatness, we've got to understand him through an artistic lens that restores to him that humanity that Katori Hall does brilliantly, you know, with Mountaintop, when I saw Angela Bassett and Sam Jackson perform that as well. But then when you think about, you know, what this amazing Ms. Morriseau is doing for Detroit.
Yes.
Detroit, a representative city, in the same way, yes, that August Wilson plumbed the depth over 10 plays of, you know, what was going on in Pittsburgh, and speaking about the jitneys that were there, talking about the struggles between Black men and Black women and kids and parents, and trying to really give us a sense of who we are as human beings, restoring agency to us.
Yes.
We were not pathological, nihilistic products of a white imagination. We forged through the crucible of art a new testimony to the expansive character of Black identity.
Well,
and it is as broad and as wide as the imagination permits expression. And so when I think about, you know, that Detroit play, that cycle of Detroit plays is astonishing to me, because, you know, Chicago had the most Negroes in the Great Migration, but, you know, being from Detroit, I got to argue, we had the most consequential in terms of artistic production, because when you think about the fact that Berry Gordy takes the metaphor of the assembly line and then grafts that on to what's happening at Motown. So he takes a literal arena of industrial and post-industrial production as the central metaphor for the reproduction of art. You ain't got to be Walter Benjamin to try to deconstruct what happens through technological means that transform artistic production. And yet Berry Gordy wanted to aim for the white earlobe so that the music, unlike what was happening in Muscle Shoals in Alabama or in Stax in Memphis, he wanted a refined artistic production that would seduce white listeners into conceding the legitimacy of Black humanity because they were captivated and colonized by our aural, A-U-R-A-L, the sonic character of Black identity that invited them into the full house of our humanity. And once the music gets us there, then what Dominique Morriseau and many other gifted artists of the word do is to begin to show the furniture, begin to show the curtains, begin to design the internal wherewithal that Blackness has existed in. So there's a relay race between artistic genres, and the beauty of what happens with that Motown play, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, is that it conjoins both the internal dynamics of artistic production and imagination with the opening up of spaces of reflection that cause us to see the beautiful, intimate rituals of Black sustenance that mediated our humanity, that when white folk were calling us nigger and thinking of us as not human and thinking of us as animals, we rescued our enemies through the art of our own culture and restored not only to ourselves our humanity, but to them as well. We gave them entree into a humanity by forgiving them enough to include them in our prayers for their peace and our art that opposed them, because rage is nothing but joy and hope turned inside out. Rage is another way to spell love in our case. But here we are, we did not sulk into secession and become Confederates. We took the hatred of the culture and transmuted it through art and preaching and through our own humanity into something more precious than they could have ever imagined. So when Thomas Jefferson is writing the words of the Declaration of Independence, and when Madison is writing the Federalist Papers, and when they are owning human beings as the enslaved, the children of our ancestors, the foremothers and the forefathers, and what they saw in us that became a reality, they invested something in us that they couldn't even themselves appreciate. And so we are the products of their imaginations. We have an obligation to use our imagination to move even further into another century or two to try to create space so that our children and our children's children and their children will be able to occupy a space that has been provided for by in the womb of our imagination. So that's what I want people to see, is that in the midst of the blight and the dual pandemics, COVID-16, 19 and COVID-19, and damn, it might be 3 pandemics, COVID 2016, when we saw the unleashing of Donald Trump is the fleshly thesaurus of white supremacy. He is the very definition of what happens when you have the brutal fascist assertion of white superiority impale itself on its own contradiction. His own apparent ignorance is the manifestation of the inability of white superiority to convince itself that it's truly superior. That's the beauty of Black and brown and red and yellow in this country. We see the mendacity. We see the lies. We saw them first. And so when America got too late, Al Green, not the singer, but the congressman, was calling for his impeachment earlier. So was Maxine Waters. Oh no, you people are too reactionary. This is from the liberals. You're too ridiculous. Now when they catch up, they don't even acknowledge we got there before you did. The pandemic may look like a Black pathology in our bodies to you, but we are the canaries in the coal mine. It will hit us first, but it will kill you in the process as well. Now you got to reopen. Now you got to put your mask on. Now you got to look like Negroes used to look in the hood in the 1970s when we put on masks to rip somebody off and to steal because you had stolen from us. Now everybody looks like a thief. Everybody is part of the underground economy. The theatricality and the dramatization of the look of people. Look at it. Can't breathe, George Floyd. Can't breathe, COVID-19. Look at the convergence of the two plagues and pandemics that we endure. The art of our culture and the beauty of our humanity will continue to illuminate the ferocious inhumanity of a white supremacy that not only will kill us, but will kill white people too. That's why our art puts an end to it. That's why when Dominique Morriseau's father plays the Ballad or the Bullet from Malcolm X, given in a church, announcing the necessity of seeing the various means of self-defense, it begins to inform her, shape her mind, so that what she produces establishes a relationship between the rhetorical and the iconic and the artistic and the imaginative. That's the beauty of looking at what she does.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, we really all should have gone to seminary. I mean, that's what I'm getting right now.
Yes.
I'm really feeling that. You know what I'm saying?
We did just go to church.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. One of the things that came to my mind is that yesterday we were talking to Woody King, and one of the things he talked about was the fact how, well, actually it's in the film called King of the Theater, and he talks about the fact that we're trying to capture the blues and jazz in our theater. But that's the struggle, that's the challenge. That's what Langston was trying to do with language. Down, you know, I heard a Negro play. You know, the kind of rhythm and notion of being that we are translating and transliterating our cultures back and forth with each other. And I think that's a really amazing idea to think about. And Michael, you triggered an idea for me. One of my theses of what Berry Gordy was about was he understood that the hood was being destroyed by Chrysler Freeway, Fisher Freeway. So he wanted his music to go outside of that. And so he wanted to create a sonic space that was a safe space for Black people to exist in. And I mean, when I think about the Chrysler and all these expressways in Detroit, which ended up bisecting and bifurcating the African-American community, always the business community, wherever you're from, if you want to know where the businesses were, at the Black businesses, look where the expressways are. I mean, Chicago, Atlanta, wherever you want to go. But the whole idea that our culture is big enough for everyone, our theater is big enough for everyone, the whole notion that it's been resisted so long. One of the things Woody talked about was the first production he did in New York was Summer and Smoke by Tennessee Williams with an all-Black cast. And Woody, Tennessee Williams came to see it and was amazed at this. And so even today we have resistance in the theater about the notion of who can do what plays and where that lands. And so, believe it or not, we only have a few minutes left. So I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to say anything or present any ideas that we wanted to share, that we came in thinking, I really want to talk about this. I really want to present this idea. So I will be quiet for a moment. We can actually have a quicker moment if we need to. And just
go see the work of Dominique Morriseau. That's what I want to leave y'all with. Definitely see that.
I think that's a great idea. And Dominique is involved in the theater in Detroit. There's all kinds of theater happening in Detroit now. Plowshares, the Public Theater in Detroit, Detroit Repertory. I'm sorry, Dominique.
Yeah, yes. And then there's a lot of smaller local theaters emerging in Detroit, and you know, so I want to help to keep building the bridge of the arts in the city of Detroit specifically, and then across the country. I do want to say to maybe whoever's watching, because I am charged, like you two Michaels have really charged me and electrified me and to do what I'm trying to do. And I want to electrify anybody I stand on a lot of their shoulders, and I stand on, you know, the shoulders of my father and the shoulders of my elders. And I recognize that I also stand on the shoulders of my peers, and that there are people standing on my shoulders. And so I guess I want to say to anybody that is standing on all of our shoulders, that this is the moment that we're in, that I want to encourage everybody. I'm being very particular right now, but I want to encourage everybody to actively participate in making this industry, this field, because the industry is such an industrialization of of our art is also a thing. But this is a field. It is a field that is supposed to have space for our creative expression, that we can own that. And I want you to actively participate in defining it on your own terms, because out of the civil rights movement, and became the Black arts movement, became all of these Black theaters that emerged in New York City and across this country, right? Became Chicano theater, happened all over the country as well, became, Native American theater started to emerge and theater companies started to emerge. I want to say we're in another civil rights movement. And so I want to charge you to make space for your art, however you see it fit, whether it is negotiation, conversation, and demanding things of white American theater, or whether it is learning how to create, because this is a time, because we're in a plague and nobody knows which of these things are going to be standing when we come out of this. That's not a sad thing. It's not a scary thing. This is a time for invention, and that's what artists do best. This is a time for innovation. And so this is the time to build the thing you want to see happen when we get out of this pandemic. There's no better time to build with your peers, like-minded, or the ones you got to challenge each other. But there's no better time to build and start the thing that you want. You don't have to worry about people letting you into their gates, because nobody knows which gates is going to be open and closing when we come out of this. You don't have to worry about being let in. You can now build and make the thing happen yourself. And so I do want to say, find a way to get in the number, get in line, get in rotation with other people that you can build with, but know that this is your moment to create the thing that you want to see. You do not have to wait or ask permission for anybody else. That's what we're trying to dismantle, is this idea of like isolated gatekeeping, that everybody has to have keys to this gate. This is art. This is for the people. You are among the people. And so make something happen that demands that when we come out of this.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Beautiful.
I'll say a last word very briefly, that Detroit has now appointed a woman named Rochelle Riley as the director of arts, culture, and entrepreneurship. And I think that bespeaks the movement of the city and the ways in which we're working together. Rochelle was instrumental in helping us get a $10,000 grant from the DTE Energy Foundation for the Black Theater Network. And when this pandemic hit and we realized we weren't going to Detroit, and the grant was to help us have our conference in Detroit, we decided to give half of that money back to the city and to the Arts Relief Fund. And so for a little tiny organization that we were able to say, this is something we want to do. This is the way in which we want to help. And I think that Dominique, one of the things I want to bring up is the way in which you've worked with Haitian relief in your life, with your family. And, so I'm sure that there are all kinds of causes that we go forward in, but we are practitioners of faith. We are people, we are healers. I love this idea of, it's not an industry, it's a space for us to heal and be with people. And with that, I want to make sure that Michael gets to say the final word, because we got a minister here.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's what an honor it is to be on with you two great Detroiters, the best of who we are, the beauty of our city, the rhythm, the power, the passion. It gets a lot of bad press in the national news. I'm defensive about Detroit because it's one of the great wombs of joy and protection that Black people have ever had. And so I'm honored to be on here with two great thinkers and artists because this is what we have to do. Think our way through this pandemic. Imagine our way beyond the lethal limits of a neo-fascist president who stands up every morning to excrete the feces of his moral depravity into a nation he's turned into his psychic commode. A man who has no understanding of the fundamental humanity of Black or brown or red or yellow people or women or gay or lesbian or non-binary people. So the art we do, the art we are, the art we produce, the art that produces us, the imagination is critical as a tool of resistance, as a tool of desire, and as a way to move beyond the hopelessness that can sometimes break us down as easily as the physical barriers we confront. So I'm glad to be a child of Detroit and to be with this rhetorical master and Brother Michael and this genius of art and Sister Morriseau. I'm glad to be here and in partnership with you all tonight to try to foster and forge a greater awareness of our humanity at its depths, and that will save us far more than even any vaccine that we might be able to generate or any answer we might be able to give to the racial catastrophe that we now confront.
Absolutely.
I want to say thank you so much. And I want to thank Marcia Pendleton for bringing us all together today.
Yes.
Marcia, my girl. Yeah, no
I
doubt.
haven't seen Marcia in real life, Michael. So I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you, Black Theater Network. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.